Hi, everybody. Today we are going to listen to chapter 14 of our book, Front Desk. Okay, while you're reading, you're going to be taking sketch notes, and then you're submitting it to Seesaw just like we do every time. Okay, once you're done submitting your Seesaw sketch notes and you've listened to the chapter completely, you are going to log into eSpark and work on eSpark until lunch. So that means you're working all the way until 11:45. Okay? And then at 12:45 after lunch, you're going to come back on to Google Meets and we're going to do some science. All right? So here we go. Chapter 14. What's wrong? Lupe asked me at recess the next day. All day I'd been walking around with a humongous cloud over my head. Do we think Mia actually had a humongous cloud over her head? What does that mean? Right? It's just a saying. It means she must have been really sad and thinking about something really heavy. Okay, there's a humongous cloud over my head. She's not having a good day. The sadness must have been leaking out of my eyes because Lupe kept looking at me. Can sadness really leak out of your eyes? Maybe if you're crying, it can leak. But she's just being a little bit dramatic, right? She's using these metaphors, okay? And she's using this figurative language to really paint a picture in our minds about how sad she is, okay? The sadness must have been leaking out of my eyes because Lupe kept looking at me. And of course, the more she looked at me, the more I wanted to tell her. But how? How would I say to her, a random guy grabbed me, clutched a fistful of my shirt, and screamed into my face that the man I was working for didn't think my life was worth $25 per square foot? How could I tell Lupe all that? Oh, come on, it can't be that bad, she said, which didn't make me feel better at all. It only made me mad because really she had no idea what she was talking about. As much as I liked Lupe, she was just in a different world, her and her perfect parents and her perfect dogs. It just wasn't fair. I stood up. I'm sorry, I just need to be alone right now, I told her, and walked away. I wandered down the hallway and ended up in the empty auditorium. There was a piano in the front, so I went down and sat on its bench. Back in China, I used to play a little with my cousins because a friend of my aunt was a teacher and gave us free lessons. I had learned Beethoven, Bach, and some simple Mozart. Of course, I hadn't touched a piano since I came over here. Gently, I lifted the cover. To my surprise, it wasn't locked. With a trembling finger, I pressed down on the middle C. I closed my eyes, feeling the note. Oh, C, how I've missed you. I picked up my other hand and ran my fingers up and down the familiar black and white keys. Slowly, I began playing For Alice. I thought I might have forgotten it. It had been 2 long years, but I still remembered it. The notes carried me far, far away. I felt weightless, soaring across an ocean of memories. I thought of my cousin Shen, how the two of us used to get all dressed up for piano recitals, me in my silk dress and him in his embroidered shirt. We'd point at each other in our old-fashioned Chinese outfits and giggle, even though deep down inside, we were both so proud to be wearing them. Then, as the curtain rose, we'd mouth, "You can do it," to each other, a flurry of excitement as we stepped onto the stage. Closing my eyes, I could almost see Shen. My fingertips could almost touch him. When I got to the dramatic section, fear poked in. This was the part I always used to mess up on. Why put a scary part in the middle of a beautiful piece? I remember asking my piano teacher, because life is scary sometimes, little one, he had said. I was only 5 at the time and didn't quite understand. Now when I played the dramatic section, my chin quivered. I felt a sob building within me as I thought about Mr. Yao and how he just took and took and took. How he refused to pay $25 a square foot to protect us, even though $25 was nothing to him. It was probably what he paid for dinner. I thought about my father, robbed of sleep, jolted awake by customers, night after night. And my mother, the way her eyes twitched at the supermarket checkout counter every time the cashier scanned a new item, and the total price jumped. I thought about Hank and his saltine burgers, and Uncle Ming and the loan sharks, and before I knew it, tears were streaming down my cheeks. As my feelings coursed through the fingers into the sad music, I suddenly heard a sound from the back. Someone was in the auditorium listening to me. I instantly stopped playing and jumped up from the piano. I hugged myself with my arms, like I was naked. Hello? I called. The small figure made its way over to me. When I saw who it was, my stomach lurched. What are you doing here? I asked Jason. Jason ignored my question and asked, Where'd you learn to play like that? I had a teacher in China, I said. Why do you care? You learned to play like that in China? He repeated. There was a flash of surprise in his eyes. I nodded. But my father said there's nothing in China except piles of dirt, he said. Your father's a liar, I said angrily. A typhoon ripped through me. My hands balled into my fists, preparing for battle. He said that you guys like to sit around and spit on the floor. That's absurd, I exclaimed. It is true none of you had any money? He asked. That part was, unfortunately, true. My parents came to America with only $200 in their pocket. How'd you learn to play the piano if you had no money? Jason asked. For some reason, this infuriated me. Why can't I learn the piano? I asked him. What, you think only rich people get to do stuff? Jason's face turned bright red. I just meant, poor people can do stuff too, I shouted at him as I slammed the piano cover and walked away. Chapter 15. How do we think Jason is feeling right now? If his face turned bright red, what does that make us think about? If Jason turns bright red and maybe he stopped mid-sentence, right? He's a little bit embarrassed of what he thinks, right? And he thinks all this because that's what his father tells him. So maybe he's going to start to realize maybe Mr. Yao is not being too nice to Mia's family, right? Okay, now you're going to go and submit your sketch notes on Seesaw, and you're going to go to eSpark, okay, and complete some islands on eSpark for reading, okay? Not Math eSpark, reading eSpark, okay, because we're in English class, all right? So go submit your sketch notes and then go to eSpark to do some reading islands. And I will see you at 12:45.